Welcome to Back to the Bible with pastor and Bible teacher Bryan Clark. Today, Bryan shares a message to help you consider what you're living for and how that's reflected in what you do every day. Later in the program, Back to the Bible CEO Arnie Cole and author Kara Whitney will join Bryan in studio to discuss some important take-home points from today's lesson. Now here's Bryan Clark with today's message.
I read this a couple of years ago, but I think about it often. Listen to what the writer says. Annie Dillard tells of the ill-fated Franklin expedition to the Arctic in 1845. That odyssey was a turning point in Arctic exploration because of its well-publicized failure. The preparations made were more suitable for the Royal Navy's Officers' Club in England than for the frigid Arctic. The explorers made room on their ships for a large library, a hand organ, china place settings, cut glass wine goblets, and sterling silver flatware instead of additional coal for their steam engines. Search parties found clumps of bodies of men who had set off to walk for help when their supplies ran out. One skeleton apparently chose to carry with him the place setting of sterling silver flatware. What must he have been thinking to take sterling silver tableware in search for help and food? One cannot imagine that any of these sailor adventurers would have said as they neared death on the frozen landscape, "I wish I had brought more silver place settings." It's really amazing when you think about it that these people were leaving to walk across the Arctic in a last-ditch attempt to survive, and they would take with them this load of silverware because it was their earthly treasure. But it reminds me sometimes how tied we get to the stuff of this earth. As a matter of fact, it reminds me a lot of Lot, who lived in Sodom, and even when the angels of the Lord clearly told him that Sodom is going to be destroyed, he couldn't bring himself to leave. He couldn't bring himself to leave what he had come to love. And the angels literally took him by the hands and drug him out of Sodom before it was destroyed. We all understand the struggle between that which is temporal and that which is eternal. The temporal is in our face every day. It screams for our attention. The temporal has to do with the walk of sight. It's right there. I can touch it, I can own it, I can purchase it, I can possess it. It's right there, and because of that, there is a great appeal to that which I understand. It represents a value system. You know, we find ourselves sometimes with these massive credit card debts. We find ourselves working from early till late, both husband and wife, scrambling just to pay the bills. And sometimes we justify that by saying we have to do that to pay the bills. And that's true, we do if we're going to keep buying all that junk. But you really have to wrestle with the question, is that really what I want to give my life to? To something that will end up as a rusty old piece of nothing in the junkyard. My neighbor Dwight and I, we went to a farm sale a few weeks ago. And it was quite entertaining. But one of the things that captured my attention was a row of combines. And I know these combines work because they drove them in and they had them running. And so the auctioneer gets to the combines and he's bidding and they're saying 20, 20, and I'm finally say to Dwight, is he meaning 20,000? He said, no, $20. They sold for $20. $25. They're old used combines, and they were basically good for nothing. Now, at one time, I'm sure some of these farmers had stretched their budget to the absolute limit in order to buy that, because they needed that. But it is a reminder that that's where those end up. They eventually end up on an auction block, $20. That's a picture of the stuff of this world. That's about how long it lasts. And it isn't just material things, it's just a value system. A couple of years ago, Sports Illustrated surveyed Olympic athletes, and they asked them, if we could give you a drug that would guarantee that you would win the gold medal, but in 5 years, you would be dead. How many of you would take the drug? 54% said they would take the drug. That represents a value system, a system that's very tied to the promotions and the accolades and the stuff of this world. But it comes and it goes. All of us feel that tension between that which is before us and that which is eternal. I read this a couple of years ago. See if it resonates as true with you. The writer says, funny how a $10 bill looks so big when you take it to church, but so small when you take it to the grocery store. Funny how big an hour serving God looks and how small 60 minutes are when spent playing golf or fishing or basketball. Funny how long a couple of hours are spent at church, but how short they are when watching a movie. Funny how we get thrilled when a football game goes into overtime, but we complain when a sermon is longer than the usual time. Funny how exhausting it is to read a chapter of the Bible, how easy it is to read 200 pages of a novel. Funny how we believe what newspapers say, but we question what the Bible says. Funny how people scramble to get a front seat at any ball game, but scramble to get the back seat at church services. Funny how we cannot fit a gospel meeting into our schedule with a yearly planner, but we can schedule for other events at a moment's notice. Funny how we need 2 or 3 weeks to fit a church event into our schedule, but can adjust that same schedule for a social event at the last minute. Well, there's truth to that. I think we all struggle with that. And it's a reflection of a value system, how tied we get to the stuff of this world and how hard it is by faith to really live for that which matters. So let me ask you a question. What did you live for this past week? I'm not asking you what you should have or what you would put down on a piece of paper as the right answer. I'm asking you actually, what did you live for? What did you give your time and energy to? What was your passion? What really was the focus of your attention this last week? I know we all struggle with issues related to time and energy, and oftentimes we find ourselves saying, I don't have time. And I understand that. I find myself saying that all the time as well. But another way to answer that would be to say, I don't value that. Because actually, we all have the time and energy for that which we value. We figure out some way to pour ourselves into that which we think is most important. So each week we live for that which we think is of most value. And the things we say no to, we're actually saying, I don't value that. So the question, what did you live for? Now don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to make a division between the sacred and the secular. I'm not saying to really live for the things that are eternal, you need to be a pastor or a missionary. You can be a student, you can be a doctor, you can be a plumber, you can be a mechanic and live every day for the things that are eternal. You can be a pastor or a missionary and live every day for the things that are temporal. It isn't a vocational thing, it's a heart thing. It's a heart thing, it's a motive thing. It's really, what is your passion? What really are you living for? And how is that reflected in what you do every day?
We're so glad you've tuned in today. Here at Back to the Bible, our heart is to share God's Word to help you experience a closer walk with Christ and move forward in faith. So to support you along the way, we've designed a wide variety of resources, and they're available at backtothebible.org. From devotions to in-depth Bible studies, Bible reading plans, even research and stories, you'll discover what you need to strengthen you along your spiritual journey. And of course, our Back to the Bible messages with Bryan Clark are also there to listen to anytime you want. Just visit backtothebible.org. That's backtothebible.org. Here again is Bryan Clark with today's message.
4,000 years ago, there were kings and rulers that had everything this world has to offer. They had wealth, they had pleasure, they had power, they had position, they had it all. And I bet there's not a person in this room that could name one of them. But there was a pilgrim, a sojourner, who bypassed the things of this world to live by faith. And everybody recognizes the name Abraham. The difference is that which is eternal, that we believe by faith. I would doubt that there's a person that would tell me what I really want to do is waste my life. That's not how we want to live. We want to live for something that matters. We don't want to get to the end and look back and say, that was my goal, to waste my entire life. How do we make sure that doesn't happen? From all that we can tell, Abraham and Sarah lived in considerable wealth when they were in Ur of the Chaldeans. That was a very civilized area. They would have had all the comforts of home, a fairly easy life. But God called them to leave that which they knew, that which they possessed, that which they understood, and to go to a place by faith that he would tell them. And by faith they left. They entered into the land of promise. And God said to Abraham, Abraham, one day all this will be yours. Right now the Canaanites own it, but one day it will be your land. And Abraham believed that. So he was a pilgrim, a traveler in a foreign land. And so they waited. They waited for 67 years. And finally Sarah died. Sarah never saw the promise realized. She never saw them own one piece of ground. She dies, and Abraham doesn't even have a piece of ground to bury her. So he has to do something about that. And in the process of that, he teaches us something we need to understand to keep us from wasting our lives. So if you have a Bible, turn with me to Genesis 23, verse 1. Now Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah lived in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Sarah was really a remarkable woman. She's the only woman in the Bible where her age is given at her death, which puts her in a very unique category. In Isaiah 51 and 1 Peter chapter 3, both biblical writers hold up Sarah as a model woman, as a godly woman, a woman of faith. She was a fellow Hall of Famer, Hebrews 11. When you think about it, really a remarkable journey. God came to Abraham. Abraham tells Sarah they pack up everything and they leave for a land that God would promise them. You imagine that conversation between Abraham and Sarah. Honey, God's promised this land to us, and we're going to move, and we're going to get the land, and we're going to build a nice house, and we're going to settle down. Imagine what it'd be like if you told your wife, honey, let's sell the house, and we're going to buy a little piece of ground in the country, and we're going to build a house and live happily ever after. Okay, let's do that. So you sell the house, but you can't find a piece of ground. So, honey, for now we have to live in this pop-up trailer for a month, for a year, for 10 years, for 67 years. I'd be a dead husband by that time. But that's what she did. 67 years in a pop-up trailer, in a tent, believing by faith God would keep his promise. He'll give us a piece of ground. He'll give us all this ground. But she never saw it happen. She died believing by faith that it would happen. Abraham comes in to mourn for Sarah. The word mourn is very strong. The Hebrew word means to beat his breast. It's the first time we ever find weeping in the Bible. Sometimes we get some crazy ideas related to faith and mourning, grieving. Sometimes we think because we're a people of faith and we trust God and we just shouldn't grieve when a loved one dies. That's really crazy. Abraham was one of the greatest men of faith of all time. But he dearly loved his wife, and when she died, he mourned. It doesn't mean he didn't have faith. It doesn't mean he didn't trust that he would see her again and all that. It's just a reality. It's a part of life. It's a part of being made in the image of God. Paul says we grieve, we just don't grieve as those who have no hope. So Abraham grieves, but then he's got to go on with business. Verse 3, then Abraham rose from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. Give me a burial site among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my lord, you are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our graves. None of us will refuse you his grave for burying your dead. So Abraham rose and bowed to the people of the land, the sons of Heth. And he spoke with them, saying, If it is your wish for me to bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and approach Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns, which is at the end of his field. For the full price let him give it to me in your presence for a burial site. Now Ephron was sitting among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the sons of Heth, even all who went in at the gate of his city, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the presence of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead. And Abraham bowed before the people of the land. And he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If you will only please listen to me, I will give the piece of the field, accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. Then Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, My lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between me and you? So bury your dead. And Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver which he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, commercial standard. So Ephron's field, which was in Machpelah, which faced Mamre, the field, the cave which was in it, and all the trees which were in the field, that were within all the confines of its border, were deeded over to Abraham for a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth before all who went in at the gate of his city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded over to Abraham for a burial site by the sons of Heth.
Now let's join Bryan Clark in studio with Back to the Bible CEO Arnie Cole and author Kara Whitney to discover some practical application from today's study.
So Abraham just purchased this burial plot for Sarah in the land God promised to them. And it's kind of remarkable if you think about it that Sarah trusted God's promises even though she didn't see one of those come to pass in her lifetime.
It is remarkable. I mean, I can't put into words how impressive I think she trusted her husband, who believed God 67 years without ever seeing the promise come to pass. But she believed.
Never at one time putting her foot down, like, I'm done. I mean, I lived in a tour bus for 5 years, and finally I was like, we need to put some roots down somewhere. So that really resonated with me.
It's an amazing story, and we like instant gratification. And she left Ur, which was pretty modern, and lived basically in a tent the rest of her life, and she died believing that the promise would be true.
Well, I think we all do that on a daily basis. I mean, with my kids, I mean, I'm counting on God to take care of them. So, and that actually levels me out a little bit when I start worrying about them. I go, well, God's got this, and he loves them more than I do. So I'm just going to trust him.
Well, and my mom always said, When she realized I wasn't a Christ follower, which was about at the age of 19, she prayed for me that I'd come to know the Lord, and she prayed for 26 years, and she never doubted. She doubted me, of course, but she never doubted God answering that prayer. So I thought that was cool.
Did she see you become a Christ follower?
Yes, and she was the one, when I called and told her, Mom, I feel God's calling me to go into ministry. She said, oh, Arnold, whatever you do, don't do that. Ministry is different, I found out, but it was good. She was happy. So, Bryan, it seems so easy to talk about eternal things in a theoretical sense and all that, but that belief is not really tested until someone you're close to dies. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think there's a lot of things we say we believe, but we don't really know until it's tested. So for me, when my dad died, that was the first time I really backed up and processed again, this is true, isn't it? Because now it wasn't theory. It needed to be true. So since that time, my dad died when I was 23. My mom died in 2014. We had a granddaughter die in 2016. I'm with people almost every week that are dealing with the reality of death. And it's like, this is true, isn't it? It's a legitimate question, but that's when we really think about it again.
So we've seen Sarah at her best and then at her worst, but at the end of the day, as you like to say, she really invested her time wisely while she was on earth. So investing our time seems that it's so important. After all, our days are numbered.
So again, she's an amazing woman, and she was willing to trust by faith. It's a very hard story. The conditions they lived in were very difficult. She remained true all the way to the end. But there's a reminder every day matters. And, we see these moments in the Old Testament story, but most of her life was lived in ordinary, everyday struggles that weren't the highlights. And that's how life is. It's made up of little moments, and they're easy to miss. Most of our life will be ordinary days. So if we miss those, we miss most of our life.
Right.
You're listening to Back to the Bible. If you'd like to listen again, you'll find today's program along with older messages at backtothebible.org. And while you're there, browse our devotions, Bible studies, and Bible plans. You'll find a wide variety there, all designed to help you experience a deeper relationship with Jesus. That's at backtothebible.org. Visit today, backtothebible.org.